Do-do-do-do-do-do-do-do at the Williams Lake Stampede. Come along, friend, and see part of the last frontier with me. We'll pack our gear and head for the rodeo. We'll camp outside of town, right next to the big fairground. We're going to see the sights at the Williams Lake Stampede. They're coming from sugarcane, horsefly, clean to clean out.
In the summer of 2012, I moved back to my old hometown, Williams Lake, BC. Willie's Puddle, we call it. It's a small, friendly little town in the BC interior. Williams Lake lies within a region known as the Cariboo-Chilcotin. It's an area bigger than Ireland at almost 80,000 square kilometers, yet amazingly home to less than 70,000 people. Lots of room for cowboys. Drive west, make the turn onto the gravel Forest Service Road, the 2000 road if you're hauling logs. If not, move over. This inviting, open landscape somehow feels like home. The beautiful blue waters of the Chilcotin River flow through Farwell Canyon and the Junction Sheep Range Provincial Park. It is, in a word, timeless. An extraordinary sight this far north. Big sage. Hoodoos, sand dunes, cactus, and somewhere in these stunning golden hills, a very special herd of California Bighorn sheep, with a history going back thousands of years. I feel inspired like never before. There is a story here.
These grasslands are probably the largest intact, temperate grasslands left on the earth. And that's why I really consider it to be an ecological wonder of the world. It's very, very special. It is the most endangered ecosystem in British Columbia, and yet it contains over 40% of all our endangered species.
I think most people now are really beginning to understand that human contact with nature is really important. A contact with nature adds a lot to our life, and in some ways people say that we need that contact with nature, and when we don't have it, people have made terms like nature deficit disorder.
Having spent the last 20 years of my life as a reluctant city dweller, I had all but lost my connection with nature. And deep down, I could feel its absence more and more. I felt lost in my own life. As the father of 12-year-old twins, what I wanted more than anything was to teach them the importance of following their dreams, even though I was selling RVs for a living, having all but given up on my own. Looking out over this landscape, I somehow know change is coming. Truly an astounding variety of wildlife rely on these rare grasslands throughout the seasons. The iconic California bighorn is certainly the most recognizable. What I know about them at this point, however, is very little. Only that over the last decade, their numbers have declined drastically.
California bighorn sheep in BC have a certain mystique about them. Inhabitants of the grassland ecosystems, which of course are pretty rare in our province.
It's always a thrill, of course, to see bighorn sheep out here in the grasslands. And being a mountaineer, I think I have a soft spot for those animals like mountain goats and bighorn sheep that live precariously on cliffs. And I can only imagine the feeling to sit on these cliffs overlooking the Fraser River below. You know, you can see them often nestled in and basically suntanning out there on these precarious little promontories and looking out over the Fraser like they've done for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years.
Through this film, I might be able to help in some small way. I can also gain a new understanding of our essential connection with nature. And perhaps most importantly, I can give my children the courage to follow their own heart. Embarking on this or any adventure has its challenges. My children can't be here, and they're growing up fast. This will be my first wildlife documentary, which is sure to keep things interesting. And as I know all too well, raising the funds needed will be a very difficult, almost impossible task. For now, I have enough to get started, and much more importantly, I have the will. So begins this filmmaker's journey.
For so long, the Junction herd has been, this icon out there in my mind as one of the major source herds for restoration of bighorn sheep, primarily in the western U.S. British Columbia has been in the transplant business for at least 60 years. 1954, I think, was the first California bighorn sheep relocation into the U.S., and it went into Heart Mountain in south central Oregon. And so in the last 50 years, British Columbia has provided over 700 bighorn sheep to 8 different western states to help with their programs. So Washington, Oregon, Idaho, California, Nevada, Utah, and North Dakota. So the Junction herd has been really a tremendous asset and resource for bighorn sheep restoration in the western U.S.
It's my first night solo camping, and the upside is there are no mosquitoes. With a -40 rated mummy bag and some hot tea, I made it through the night without losing any body parts. Note to self: the nights this time of year begin about 5 o'clock. Bring a book next time, a big one. Winter can be a beautiful time here. I love every moment in the bright morning sun. Now all I need is a customer. I hope to find the Bighorns on my first attempt, as I really needed a confidence booster. From over 500 yards away, they saw me first. Unbelievable eyesight. The Junction Sheep Range Provincial Park, at its modern-day peak, was home to well over 500 California Bighorn sheep. Then, at some point, around 1995, the herd started to decline. And the decline continued. Although numbers vary, the herd dropped to about 100 animals by the midpoint of the next decade. For now, at least, they are still here, and I am very happy this small herd has found me. I am hooked. These are without a doubt very interesting characters. I think they could definitely play the lead role in a movie. I wanted to make it to the Churn Creek protected area, but we got hit with a big snowfall. Not the best road for a small car, but the 110-kilometer trip went surprisingly well. No life-changing incidents or spilled coffee. Driving can be a very reflective time for me. I think about the challenges ahead, about raising funds. I think about my children. Their laughter echoes through my thoughts. It seems impossible that they will soon be 14. Another sharp decline has happened out here, just downstream from the Junction Sheep Range Park. The Churn Creek protected area was once home to over 600 bighorns. This included a rare migratory herd with a healthy, sustainable population. Now very few are said to remain. The future for the Churn Creek Bighorns is an unknown.
We're at probably a record low for bighorn sheep, ewe lambs and rams. I know when we came here in '98 that the migratory herd on Churn Creek that still went to Red Mountain was about 200 animals. And I think now it's down to about 18, anywhere between 18 and 25. Everybody's kind of got their own opinion of why. The resident herds along the river are all down. Scrappies, I remember seeing 100 ewes and lambs there, and I don't think there's a dozen now.
After much searching, one magnificent ram shows himself for a few brief moments.
It's been a tough story for them over the past 20 years with the high populations in the early and mid 90s and then declining fairly rapidly.
Now the population has gotten here dangerously low, but we don't see sheep anymore easily. You do sometimes see them, but it seems to be getting harder and harder to find sheep.
We used to see, up to a dozen rams out here at the point, and they kind of ranged all the way from Eagle Tree on the east side of Clyde Mountain and down, and I don't think there's two left in there. We don't see them hardly ever at all anymore.
Back at the junction, I found a small herd grazing in the fresh snow. So quiet and peaceful as they nibble away on bunch grass and rabbit bush. The lambs, now fully weaned from the ewes, are looking strong and healthy in their thick winter coats. At the beginning of the 19th century, there were 2 million bighorn sheep in North America. Today, there are about 80,000. California bighorns are now considered to be a species at risk. I think about how small their impact is on the world, their footprint. They quietly pass by, leaving the land and each other intact, generation after generation. I wonder about our impact, the insatiable need for more, supported by the perilous exploitation of our natural resources. In the end, we are left with nothing but the highest personal debt in history. And then I watch them, quiet, calm. This young ram decided to relax in the warm afternoon sun. They know how to do it. I feel better just watching them. And learn from their example. I'm getting more comfortable with these solo camping trips. But being alone out here at night can be somewhat unnerving. Still, the solitude and peace is truly breathtaking. I think more and more about the value of wilderness. It's simply invaluable. It's spring. The sun is warmer. Beautiful pintails frequent these temporary meltwater ponds. I feel a little selfish having this all to myself. No bighorns along Churn Creek Canyon though. Not one. I can hike further now and seem to be in a near constant state of bliss as I travel this magnificent landscape. It's getting harder and harder to leave this behind, but I know it won't be for long. This ewe never made the winter. A big loss when their numbers are already too low. The trouble here is an all too familiar story in many areas. I listened to numerous and very technical presentations on bighorn sheep. Millions of dollars have gone into wild sheep conservation efforts throughout the U.S. and Canada. Their numbers, health, and extensive scientific research. As I learn more about bighorn sheep and the challenges they face, one problem seems to stand out more than any other.
In general, you look at probably 3 or 4 major challenges. Certainly human footprint, human development is one. Anything that truncates seasonal or daily movement opportunities for sheep between winter and summer ranges. In the desert, maybe it's access to water. In other parts of their range, it might be, access to lower elevation, snow-free winter ranges. So human footprint is certainly an element. Vegetative succession, in the absence of fire, a lot of sheep habitat has been compromised over the last 80 to 100 years. Wild sheep rely on their eyesight to detect predators. And so the more horizontal structure you have, a brushy or a tree canopy situation, the less quality that habitat is for those bighorn sheep. So vegetative succession, fire management is certainly another one. Frankly, domestic sheep, potential contact and potential disease transmission from domestic sheep to bighorn sheep is certainly a huge challenge. In fact, it's probably the biggest challenge in the 14 western states that we have, and it's certainly a challenge here in southern BC and southern Alberta.
In the mid-90s, there was a massive outbreak of pneumonia in bighorn sheep in Hells Canyon, which is just about 35 miles from where our lab is located. And I was supervising the bacteriology section of the lab at that time, and so we had samples from dozens and hundreds of dead bighorn and dying bighorn sheep coming through the laboratory, and it was a terrible infectious disease. There's not many infectious diseases that can kill off 50% of a whole population all at once. That was a real eye-opener to me.
It impacts our wild populations instantly. So if we have contact, we usually have dead sheep within 6 weeks. And then it's sustainable through their lamb recruitment for probably 10, 15 years. So the science is still out there. We're not sure where it's going to take us on everything, but that's the biggest thing that's going to impact them. And secondly would be loss of habitat.
I really need to hear another side of this story. I met Cynthia at her family-operated sheep farm near Williams Lake. Cynthia maintains a flock of up to 150 sheep here, making this operation one of the largest in BC. I found she was a surprisingly strong advocate for conservation and environmental awareness. As this property is a stopping point for migratory birds, she uses no pesticides or fertilizers. Both llamas and sheepdogs are used as guardians to protect the flock. Although there are no bighorn sheep in this area, Cynthia was very much aware of the disease transmission hazards from domestic sheep. She explained that some of the smaller producers may lack this knowledge as they are not part of any sheep breeders association. Fencing may not be adequate, or in some cases the sheep are simply allowed to roam at will. There may be many small farms throughout the Bighorns range that are simply off the map. Education and awareness is the only hope. It's late May now as I set up camp and hike throughout the Junction sheep range. I feel more at home out here than I ever thought possible. My old life in the city seems far away. The things that really matter to us can often become obscured by the very cloud of dust we have kicked up from our daily grind. The simple beauty of life is always there, quietly awaiting one's notice. If the Bighorns are going to survive, they need lambs. And this is the time to find them. I search the grassy hillsides near their secret hideaways. The ewes are very protective of their newborns and difficult to find. They almost always see me first, of course. Almost always. What a miracle it is to finally see these tiny lambs. Their world seems like a special place lost in time. This herd's bloodlines are still intact after thousands of years. If you're going to be available, I am now very low on funds for this film. So much time must be spent on trying to raise money. Not my favorite part of being a filmmaker. But I suppose this is nothing more than a little self-pity. Adding insult to injury are the mundane tasks of day-to-day life that seem to demean one's very existence. No poetry here. No journey. Just time passing. And it's in short supply. I fall into a deeper melancholy looking at my children's pictures. The years have passed so quickly. It always feels so right to be back out here, fundraising successful and vacuuming done. Some unusual travelers take refuge in these grasslands. The American white pelican. I've always thought they were among the most graceful of aviators, The long-billed curlew nests here every spring. A very large shorebird, its bill up to 8 inches in length. This chatty little one may have come all the way from the Gulf of Mexico. The prickly pear cactus is now very colorful in full bloom. I am told they are quite edible. I decide to set up camp on Churn Creek and resume searching for the elusive bighorn. It's hard to imagine this was home to a healthy bighorn population not so long ago.
Pneumonia usually comes about through contact with domestic stock, through domestic sheep. So either aerosol or nose-to-nose contact. And it can have a fairly devastating effect on sheep populations, and they can crash very quickly. They do normally recover if there's any sheep left to recover, but we can see die-offs that more than 90% of the animals in a very short time. So that really decimated those herds at that time. But that seemed to run its course, as it usually does, and we've seen these events before. So the main question now is, why hasn't the population increased?
With every answer, the problem becomes more perplexing. I am thrilled to finally see these rams appear on the steep slopes near Churn Creek. Remnants of the Red Mountain migratory herd.
Predation is certainly a factor that has to be recognized and managed as well. So they're a complicated critter, and the management that goes into wild sheep is very complex.
A predator population like cougars or wolves are basically supported by the most common prey that they take. So if you have an increase in deer populations, you'll have an increase in cougars. If you have an increase in moose, you'll generally have an increase in wolves. And that dynamic plays itself out. But if there are rare species on the landscape, bighorn sheep in the case of cougars in a cougar deer system, and often caribou in the situation of a moose wolf system, often that rare species is the one that loses. So you end up with this elevated level of cougars or wolves, and they take these rare prey almost incidentally, but it can really have quite a devastating effect on those populations.
I traveled a spectacular 16-kilometer driveway that leads to the historic Empire Valley Ranch. John and his wife Joyce are a wonderful, hard-working husband and wife team, homeschooling their children and running a sizable cattle ranch. It was a privilege to spend time with them.
I think every morning I'm fortunate or thankful that I live here, and not somewhere else. But it was also a choice. It wasn't a destiny, it was a choice, and everybody's got it to make where they want to live. I'm a little bit eccentric, I guess, because I'm 45 years old. I've never paid a power bill. I've never lived in a town. I'd like my kids to do whatever they want to do, because I'm really fortunate in that myself and my wife have chose something. I've never been unhappy doing what I'm doing. I've always got to do what I love to do. And I guess I just hope my children get to do that. I'd love it if it's ranching, but it doesn't matter if it isn't. they're going to witness something growing up that very few people have. And not just the occupation, but doing it in the location. You know, nobody gets to see this.
The Empire Valley Ranch is very much a part of the Churn Creek protected area. Tucked away from urban life, this is the real world. This is where our food comes from, and these are the people that make it happen. I talked to John about the bighorns in the area. He has some strong opinions and speaks from the point of view of a man trying to run a cattle operation.
Predation has been a huge thing. There's been a high influx of cougars, always had lots of cats. About 2002, 2003, the wolves really came in really thick, and they've been getting thick, probably peaked about 2010, I guess. But when the wolves came up, the cougars came up also, in the simple reason that there was less, used to be a lot of resident hunters come in and hunt cougars in the winter. Since the wolves came by, people just quit hunting cougars because their dogs were getting tore up. You couldn't turn your dogs loose on a cougar track because the wolves would come in and kill your dogs. So virtually there's no resident hunting pressure on the cougars anymore, so their numbers have skyrocketed. Wolves are up. They've been up provincially, especially Caribou-Chilcotin. They bother us a bit in May and June. The rest of the year they're eating deer and sheep is a big part of their diet. We see wolf tracks down here along the river in Churn Creek in August, and the only thing around here then that they're living off is sheep. So it's been a huge impact I'm sure the wolves have made on them. We've kind of had an ongoing battle with them. Sometimes we win, sometimes we don't. I'm sure there's lots of people who believe that we shouldn't be here and just the wolves should. You know, but I think the numbers have hit probably an all-time high. I think there's more wolves here now than there was pre-man. Pre-us anyways, pre-Caucasian, because they've got so many more species to feed on. You know, we've introduced all these domestic bovine species and horses that have gone feral, that we're feeding them for half the year. It was before they'd just starve out and die. We'd take a pack out, there might be anywhere from 3 to 5 wolves, and you take them out over a month. And it used to be originally when we had packs come in, you'd take a pack out and you'd have no wolves for a year. Well, all of a sudden, when you take a pack out, you had no wolves for 3 weeks or a month, and then another pack came in. So we were taking out 3 and 4 packs a year. And that's still where we're at. We had a small pack this last winter that we took out, and we never had any, and all of a sudden, the 10th of April, we got 4 more showed up. And they're on Churn Creek, we bumped into them. There's only one thing to eat on Churn Creek. Again, the sheep are getting hit.
We eliminated most of the poisoning and other systematic programs to eliminate wolves. And as a result, we've seen wolf populations rebound and expand their range over the last several decades. That's probably still going on. So that's compounding the predation issue in this area, probably.
I don't know, I've oftentimes wondered where a passion for wilderness and need to connect with nature, where that comes from. And I think it comes at the childhood level. I think it's having the freedom and to be on the land and the freedom to learn about the land and maybe a little guidance in learning about the land, but even just being here. I think that's why it's really important to bring young people out to places like this.
I am a happy man. I introduced my son Michael to the Junction. While sharing these priceless moments with my son, I was once again reminded of the profound importance of nature in our lives. I asked Michael to imagine a world without this. He thought about it a moment and explained quite succinctly that it would suck. I look around at all this, and I have to say, I agree.
What always blows me away is the people who make decisions about areas such as this have never been here. They don't know the spirit of the grass. And yet they make all the critical decisions for us. They're not connected. These grasslands here are part of what is known as the Chilcotin Arc, which is the largest intact wilderness temperate area anywhere on the planet. And I just feel that's so valuable. It's just so rare in the world. And when you think back to the Canadian Rockies or south of the border to Yosemite. These are all places that were scheduled to be developed. It took people of great vision to set them aside, and people who had long-term vision. And now, if you look at the Rockies, it employs thousands of people every year, like forever, and it generates hundreds of millions of dollars for the whole nation, really. And although these areas here in the Chilcotin, the Caribou Chilcotin, they may be remote right now, but they're not going to be remote that much longer. And I feel that these grasslands and the wilderness areas that are just west of us here will become our greatest asset. They will become our greatest source of employment, and they will be a huge asset to this region. It's a matter of thinking long-term versus short-term. I looked up and I saw the full moon coming over the ridge here, and you could literally see the sagebrush across the valley against the moon. And God, I ran to my 600 millimeter lens, and I can remember it was one of my most memorable photographic experiences out here in the grasslands was capturing the full moon coming over the ridge and lighting up the whole grassland and the Fraser River Canyon. It was an amazing end to an amazing trip.
I think Chris is one of the most authentic people I have ever known, and it's easy to see his love for wilderness runs deep.
In many ways, I think the land still holds the memory. There are burial grounds, native burial grounds, very close to us where we stand here. There are old village sites close to us where we stand here. And that, in some ways, their soul is in here, and in some ways I feel that connection through them to this landscape as well.
I was honored to take part in an awe-inspiring journey through time, traveling the mighty Fraser from Churn Creek north to the Chilcotin River Junction. This is one of the largest salmon-spawning rivers in the world at 850 miles long. As we pass through these canyons, the Fraser River feels alive, like a special sacred place, wild and untamed. These petroglyphs, a distant voice from generations past. thousands of years, First Nations people have lived out their lives in this land. This great blue heron knows the waters of the Chilcotin as well as anyone. The Fraser may be a mighty river, but nothing is invincible. Industries along its path are polluting these waters with pulp mill effluent, mine tailings, and sewage. Why treat this great river and so many others with such a lack of respect?
Wait, somebody's picking us up there today. Yeah.
The grizzly?
Oh yeah.
Really?
Saw one little guy that couldn't get up the bank when all this slippery logs, and he saw us, and all of a sudden he just flew up that bank. Funny.
How about bighorn sheep?
No, we looked, but we were going through some rapids there, so we couldn't really look. We were too busy.
Yeah.
I think we had one block there on the camp last night. We camped right at the Chilcotin Fraser Junction. There was some people see the tracks and heard some noise.
He's pretty skittish, I guess.
Yeah, we thought we'd see Parker.
If only one could measure the spin-offs nature provides in the same clever way industry claims when pushing for new developments. We could see how wilderness areas like this affect so many lives in a positive way over generations. It's possible there may not be a simple answer as to why the bighorns that have roamed here for thousands of years face an uncertain future.
It might not have been contact between those specific sheep and domestic sheep, but contact with other infected wild sheep. So those populations are, I wouldn't say that they're continuous throughout there, but certainly there are these forays that individual sheep take, and that they could have had contact with other infected herds from farther south. That's probably likely. But following that stuff is sometimes pretty difficult to know exactly. It isn't always clear. I think that there's obviously been issues of disease in the past, namely pneumonia. That seems to have run its course, but there is the suggestion that it could be some other pathogen that we just haven't explored more recently, and that might be explaining the failure to recover.
Our findings in 2011 of Mycoplasma pneumonia as being significant in this mortality, or the lamb mortality in Big Bar, sort of confirmed that these same sorts of disease processes or agents were involved in pneumonia in British Columbia.
Mycoplasma pneumonia is known to be hosted by caprinae, and that includes domestic sheep and goats. Cattle aren't known to be colonized by it. Wild deer aren't known to be colonized by it. Llamas, horses, it just doesn't live in those species. So that normal host range of Mycoplasma pneumonia is very consistent with the known risk of exposure of bighorn sheep to domestic sheep or goats to result in pneumonia. we have evidence that some of those healthy adults can carry this bacterial pathogen for life, presumably. And so even though they're immune to it, that immunity doesn't get passed sufficiently onto their lambs. So when the lambs hit a certain age, they catch this infection probably from their own mothers, and then have an epidemic of pneumonia in the lambs every year. So we're really interested in these carriers. How many of them are there? Can we identify them and get rid of them? Can we identify them and treat them? Anything that we can do. We also see some populations where a pneumonia outbreak hits the bighorn sheep, and they may lose their lambs like this for a couple of years, but then the disease just seems to go away. And all of a sudden, lamb recruitment returns to normal and the population grows again. And usually for those populations we go into them, the mycoplasma has disappeared. And so is it because there were just so few carriers that they just happened to lose the one ewe that was the carrier? Or is it a strain of the mycoplasma that can't persist as well? Those are the kind of fundamental questions that we're after. We really think this persistence in the population and chronic infections of the ewes is a key to solving this disease problem.
Wild sheep populations across their dwindling range have suffered through it all: lungworm, predation, loss of habitat, disease from domestic sheep, mite infestations, poaching, white mussel disease, overhunting, and the list goes on. While their plight continues. To me, the bighorns and their struggle is symbolic of all wildlife. There is no one species whose survival is guaranteed if we are careless or complacent. Not even our own. It's almost Christmas as I travel through Jasper National Park on my way to see two very special people.
Incoming call. press the pickup button to answer.
The Rocky Mountain Bighorn sheep here are habituated to traffic and intent on licking up road salt. They simply ignore the huge semi-trucks a foot away blasting their horns. Quite a difference from the Bighorns I'm used to. Very seldom will they allow anyone near them. As it should be. I gush with joy even as my children ignore me. Their focus on electronic devices is unbreakable. I make sure, though, that we get outdoors and awaken to the world around us. I feel reassured seeing them. Please state your name to the camera. They're going to be okay. It's a brand new year, and although one can plan life out on a spreadsheet, ultimately the months and years ahead remain an unknown. I'm good with that. Jerry, a longtime friend and avid outdoorsman, joins me on a hike through a remote area known as Churn Flats. Of course, we were hoping to find the migratory herd. Sadly, not even a glimpse. Despite this, we were both intoxicated by the vast landscape around us. I am struck by the ideal setting nature provides for us to strengthen our relationships with each other in ways not easily found within the confines and distractions of urban life.
I think it's really restorative to the human soul, at least it is to mine. And I think it is to many other people. People who come here to Churn from other areas are often totally shocked and totally amazed at the land they see here. It's a spectacular landscape, and the more we know about it, I think understanding the geology and the wildlife, you begin to feel at home here. In the city, you begin to wonder, where are we at? Where are we going? All the stress, but you come down here and you feel part of the land, part of the plants, part of the wildlife, part of the geology, and the world seems to be okay place again.
It's kind of like until I'd gone to Alaska or gone to the Yukon, well, I'm damn glad that there are places like that, even though I had never been there. So it's kind of like heaven. I hope someday I get there, may not, but I want to know that it's out there. And so you bet. Roadless, backcountry, wilderness areas provide a lot of important wildlife habitat, but also that opportunity for solitude that so many people crave.
I Ironically, I find myself wanting to share this world even though I have become totally at ease on my own here. My brother Ken, hogging the brandy, and our good friend Larry, the soup Nazi, plan a 3-night trip into the Churn Creek area with no real expectations, other than sharing some time together and hiking across the grasslands. Even though the migratory herd remained elusive, we happily trekked for miles across this spectacular land. How can we convey the vital importance of our wilderness areas in a world that is increasingly concerned with measurables, outcomes, and profits? PowerPoint presentations will never capture the deeper connection to the land, to each other, and to life itself that is made possible simply by standing in nature's presence. In the beginning, I was hoping there would be a clear and straightforward way to ensure a future for these and other important bighorn herds. As with most things in life, there are no simple answers. There are many troubling issues that remain unresolved, but there are also many good people trying to help. A comprehensive recovery plan is now being prepared for the Churn Creek protected area. There is always room for hope. I never did see the migratory herd, but that doesn't mean they didn't see me. The bighorns, wherever they may roam, are worthy of our respect and attention. As are all wild creatures on this small blue planet. The wilderness we have saved to date, a testament to our willingness to try. And that some, at least, understand this is important to us all.
There's a very high probability to this more than one factor. So that makes it difficult. So we could be dealing with a predator-prey issue that might have several different facets. It might not be a single species that you can point to that's having that effect. It might be multiple species. And at the same time, the population might be compromised by some sort of disease outbreak.
We want to keep our mind open to predators, nutrition, lungworm, some of the other things that have caused problems in other locations in the past. So we're keeping a fairly broad-based approach to the research.
The Wild Sheep Society of BC, obviously our affiliate for the province here. And then the management agencies, the fish and game agencies, the federal land managers, Crown Land here in the province, private landowners. It's been a real collaboration between a lot of diverse stakeholders to get bighorn sheep back on the road to recovery.
They've got problems, clearly, and part of the problems are the more successful they are brought back to the levels they were historically, the more risk there is for introducing these exotic agents, which are going to then cause problems with their persistence and survival.
As long as we stay focused on what we're doing and we can keep educating people about that disease issue, I think the future for bighorn sheep is going to be a positive one, and hopefully we can get our numbers where they're sustainable for, like I said, for future generations, so my kids and their kids can enjoy those sheep out in the mountains.
You know, I think they're constantly going to be under pressure. I mean, we've got increased residential and agricultural development. You know, the habitat loss is going to concentrate animals in areas. Agricultural activities will alter the way bighorn sheep and other wildlife use the landscape. So I think it's going to be a constant challenge to try to maintain good populations and mitigate the effects of human activity on these populations.
It's becoming increasingly difficult from a political standpoint to manage the predators. And it's not the Wild West anymore. And I think that most of our society accepts predators as an important element of our wildlife populations, and that they deserve to be on the landscape as well.
You know, if predation numbers come back up, and which is quite easily they could, you know, they have to eat. They're protein eaters, right? You know, it'd probably take them a lot less time to wipe out 25 than it did with 200, you know, and put that on top of the sickness so they don't have the strength and the stamina to escape and reach the escape terrain. I don't know if they have a future. Honestly, I don't know.
It's really our world to shape as we see fit. There's no right or wrong answers in this. It's all about the path we as a society choose. And some people think some paths are more important than others. And it's not really my job to say which one of those paths is correct if I'm going to give objective advice. I just have to say, these are the consequences of the choices we make.
In August, I filmed a breaking story at the Mount Polly mine near Quesnel Lake, BC. The mine's enormous tailings pond, filled with 25 million cubic meters of toxic sludge and heavy metals, had exploded through its poorly designed earthen dam. Nearby Polly Lake was completely destroyed. The pristine waters of Quesnel Lake may not fully recover for decades, if ever. This was the largest environmental disaster in BC's history. I hear again and again how we all need jobs. Of course we do. No argument there. We all need jobs.
You have to get away from the trappings of society, even for brief times. The longer the better. I've enjoyed that myself. I see that being important in my own kids' lives, and it's extremely important to them, and it troubles me because I see more and more of it being lost.
I tried to figure out a way to earn a living which will enable me to be outdoors. And so I was involved in starting the very first adventure tour company in British Columbia. And I began to guide. It was new. It was back in the mid-70s. The whole idea of paying someone to take you out into the natural world, to photograph or to hike, was sort of like a new concept. But we stuck with it, and I've spent my life now taking people out into the natural world to experience and to reconnect with nature.
I grew up on the edge of a small town in Wisconsin without much to do other than to wander the fields and ponds, and so I spent my childhood doing that, and I guess I developed a love for doing that that's lasted my whole life. I actually went into veterinary medicine with the idealistic view that it was going to be a career that could be worthwhile doing but wouldn't tie me down to an office or a laboratory. And of course, where'd I end up? Tied down to an office or a laboratory. So working on a problem like this is a way of keeping that connection with wildlife and natural world that hard otherwise.
I've spent time in the Arctic. I've spent time in the northern provinces, and when I was younger, they were untouched. There was no industrial and oil development, no seismic lines. There was really untouched wilderness, and that's becoming harder and harder to find.
This experience has shaped my life in profound and unexpected ways. I feel something out here I've not felt anywhere else. I see something different. Not just the landscape, but something within. Things keep changing in life, for me, my children, for all of us. Out here, things change too, but at a different pace, calm and inevitable. For thousands of years, summers have come and gone. The salmon return. The bighorns move down the valley. I hope it will always be this way, even as we come and go, with the hot summer winds of the grasslands. Somehow, in the end, the story seems to have written itself, as though there was an inevitable conclusion from the first day I looked out over the grasslands in awe and chose to live the life I had imagined. In June of 2014, I was asked to produce a film for Adventure Canada. It would allow travel to some of the most remote regions of Newfoundland and Labrador. I never hesitated. It would lead me back to the place this film started, and a new beginning. I met Vanessa from St. John's, Newfoundland on that ship. We were married 3 months later, in a place I knew very well. My children, our families and friends were there with us.
Will you, Robert, in the presence of God and these assembled witnesses, take Vanessa to be your wife? Will you love her, comfort her, honor and keep her in sickness and in health, and forsaking all other, keep yourself only for her, so long as you both shall live?
I will.
And will you, Vanessa, in the presence of God and these assembled witnesses, take Robert to be your husband? Will you love him, comfort him, honor and keep him in sickness and in health, and forsaking all other, keep yourself only for him, so long as you both shall live?
I will.
To Robert and Vanessa Moberg.
Doodle-doodle-doodle-doodle-doo-doo-doo at the Williams Lake Stampede. Come along, friend, and see part of the last frontier with me. We'll pack our gear and head for the rodeo. We'll camp outside of town, right next to the big fairground. We're going to see the sights at the Williams Lake Stampede. They're coming from Sugarcane, Horsefly, Clean Alkali, Prince George, and Cornell. Coming from Soda Creek, Cache Creek, Anaheim, Bella Coola, Little Witch, you know darn well. They'll come from far and wide. Have a little drink and watch the cowboys ride, singing doo-doo-doo-doo-doo-doo-doo-doo at the Williams Lake Stampede. Those broncs from over hill, they'll test the cowboy's skill. We'll watch them ride those mean old Brahma bulls, and we'll shake hands with old friends that we're glad to see again. We're gonna meet them all at the Williams Lake Stampede. There's a pretty girl I know there, big brown eyes and long black hair. As the guitars play, we'll dance beneath the stars. But at noon when I awake, I might feel my poor head ache. Not anymore, folks, from the night before at the Williams Lake.